Dzień dobry. Już na samym początku ogłoszenie. Tłumaczenie polskie jest dostępne na kanale portugalskim PT. Wybraliśmy ten kanał, ponieważ kanał polski nie zawsze wypada doskonale. Translation into English is available under the English language in Zoom, as well as on YouTube channel of EURACTIV Poland.
Zoom is not perfect for the Polish channel. So if you want to listen to the Polish interpretation, switch to Portuguese channel. Right now, I'd like to start the interpretation. I'd like to welcome you warmly at the webinar titled Just Transition of Coal Regions, How to Make It Just. It is organized by the EURACTIV Poland and the Konrad Adenauer Foundation in Poland with the support of the European Commission. My name is Karolina Zbytniewska and I am the editor-in-chief of EURACTIV Poland. It is my pleasure to hold this discussion. This discussion is important due to economic and environmental reasons, but it is nonetheless very important due to social reasons. We invited a group of the best experts in this domain today. They are experts for just transformation, for just transition. This is PhD Anna Sobczak from the European Commission. She is the policy coordinator for EU coal regions in transitions in the DG Energy for European Commission. It is in the context of European Green Deal. Today we also have Izabela Zygmunt from the Polish Green Network from the CE Bankwatch organization. Today we also have BERND from the Direction General in the European Commission, the head of the Unit of Ecological and Social Transition, and Mr. PHILIPP LITZ, project manager in the International Coal Transition from Agora Energiewende. He is an expert. And Mr. President Maciej Sytek, the President for the Regional Authorities Board for the Wielkopolska and the President of the Board Regional Development Agency in Konin. He is the President of the Board for Wschodnia Wielkopolska organization. I would like to welcome you all warmly here. Before we move on to the discussion, I would like to introduce you to the subject. Well, what exactly is the Just Transition Fund we are going to discuss today? It is one of the European Green Deal mechanisms. European Green Deal is a plan of the European Union, plan of action towards sustainable economy and environmental neutral economy. It focuses regions and economies based on coal. Poland is supposed to receive around 3.5 billion euro, which are targeted to regions which suffer most impact of this energy transition. Now we will move on to discuss how such energy transition takes place in practice. We will start with Ms. Izabela Zygmunt, who is an expert on energy transition in CE Bankwatch. Izabela, could you tell us how coal mining regions undergo this transition in Poland? Unfortunately, Ms. Izabela Zygmunt's microphone is off. Right now we can hear Ms. Izabela Zygmunt. Good morning. Here, I would like to present in short the background of just transition in Poland. We all know that in Poland, the energy system is strongly based on coal. We have 6 regions where coal is extracted and burned. Those 6 regions right now are at various levels of just transition, transformation, preparation. I would like to start with Eastern Wielkopolska, where its plan for just transitions is quite advanced. And we also have a plan for neutral economy to be reached up to 2030. It is the only one case in our coal mining regions. We also have Silesia, where around 80,000 people work in coal mining regions. We also plan just transition there at quite an advanced level. However, there is no schedule for how to reach it in time, and we are not certain what to do with coal mines. We also have 3 other regions which are being prepared for the just transition. This is Bełchatów in the Łódź Voivodeship, coal mining region in Małopolska, and Troszowskie region. The discussion there has just been launched. It's not an advanced level, but we are discussing it. We also have a coal region where one region where nothing is going on right now. All those regions have certain reasons to accelerate the phase out from coal. I would like to give you several examples of it. We also have the imperative concerning climate change, but in Lubelskie Voivodeship, we have Bogdanka coal mine, which is not in financial distress, but if it wants to cooperate further on, it will has to mine coal from bogs which are environmentally precious. We also have the Truszowskie coal mining region, where the mine should be closed as soon as possible because there we have international conflict concerning drought. Some people there have no access to drinking water. At Silesia and Małopolska regions, there are coal mines which have to open new deposits, and every time it triggers strong opposition from the local community. Therefore, there's no possibility to develop those coal mines there because it triggers conflicts. Moreover, we have the Polish coal mining group, which is a company which is co-owner of those coal mines, is at the verge of bankruptcy, and there is no prospects of coming back to its profitability. Moreover, we do not have any progress in the discussion between the government and trade unions. Trade unions believe that government should give grants for the next 30 years to support coal mining industries. This is the general scene of discussion between the government and trade unions in the coal mining sector. Finally, we have energy companies which burn the coal in their power plants. All of them right now go forward the strategy to invest in green energy sources, and coal assets make it difficult for them to get subsidies and finances from other entities. Finally, coal assets become less and less profitable for them. Other energy sources are more beneficial. Despite all the arguments which are for accelerating phase out from coal, we do not have any national plan for moving out of using coal. Maybe it is connected with the fact that we do not have any broader energy strategy for 2050. Therefore, planning energy transition in Poland has an obstacle concerning the national path for energy transition. Thank you very much. Now we would like to move on to the representative of the region, which is Wschodnia Wielkopolska, the Eastern Wielkopolska, Mr. Maciej Sytek. Wielkopolska Wschodnia, it is the first sub-coal region which has the chance to reach climate neutral policy. It is also the first region for just transition, which is ready for just transition. At the same time, just transition strategy is being developed by the Ministry of Climate. Are you aware of this work in Eastern Wielkopolska, and how committed are you to those? What is the situation right now, and what should be the situation in your opinion? Unfortunately, we can't hear you. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I hope that all of you are in good health, because today it is the main subject we encounter every day. And in response to your question, I want to say that I have just finished an online meeting with the Ministry of Funds and the Ministry of Climate, and we were discussing the national plan that has been dedicated to the Silesia Institute. The Silesian Institute is going to prepare this plan. In fact, I didn't receive much information. We had a short meeting with a representative who is going to work on it. Honestly speaking, we do not fully understand the general environment we are working in. We have regulations which should be prepared by the regions, and at the national level, we should have it integrated into one overall plan. Right now, we have a situation where we have transition plan being prepared, and at the same time, the Ministry of Climate prepares the national just transition plan, and the Ministry of European Funds works on programming this. Therefore, we, in a way, miss the cohesive message. After this meeting, most probably we'll be able to work on it. However, it is crucial how given regions prepare themselves for the transition plans. Irrespective of the amount of funds, these are the regions who are going to face the just transition of energy, local community, and identity, because these are the areas the just transition will touch on. So we know that regions are aware what they need. On the other hand, Izabela mentioned that the Eastern Wielkopolska is the only region that has prepared a ready plan of just transition for its region. Other regions are falling behind. I believe that the problem is more complicated. We have been working on it for several years, since the platform was created for coal mining regions. That was the beginning of the whole process. Of course, we have Silesia and Lower Silesia. Those regions were working on their plans. They have worked on them, and we don't know how advanced their work is. In our region, the situation is easier. Our region is relatively small. Self-government authorities are very focused on it. We also have a private owner. It is a huge company. It is a SOBCZAK in Konin, and its approach to the situation is reliable, business-oriented, and it has just announced its green transformation. Therefore, our situation is easier. The situation in Silesia is much more difficult, but Izabela mentioned a thing which is very important. We need to have clear declaration that we have to have a phase out from the coal. We cannot pretend we are small children and when we close our eyes, nobody will see us. We have to face the problem. We have coal mining companies and companies dealing in energy which have to accept this situation, and the government needs to see the goal to reach. This is the most important issue. This territory where such transformation needs to take place, we need to commit all the stakeholders, not only coal mines, but also local community, non-governmental organizations, trade unions, and all those that are engaged in this process and will be committed to it. Right now, I will start speaking in English. Thank you very much.
Manager, International Coal Transition in the Agora Energiewende think tank. It would be great if you could provide the German perspective and reality of coal transformation transition. Therefore, my question is to you on the German example of the green transition of coal regions. What have been the main challenges that you can now warn us in Poland not to repeat, and what are the lessons that Polish coal regions could learn from Germany?
Thank you, Karolina, also for the kind invitation and giving me the possibility here to present the German case. I'm very well aware that every energy transition, every just transition process is actually very unique based on the resources and the conditions in the specific countries. But again, thanks very much for inviting me, because I think, as I've already heard from your explanations and Mrs. SOBCZAK's and Izabela's words, I hear that there are a lot of commonalities also in the coal region. So I think it makes sense to take a look at the mistakes that have been made and also the lessons learned that might be valuable for one another. Germany has learned this the hard way. It has already done 3 transformation processes in its coal mining regions. The first were the phase out of hard coal mining in the west, which ended 2018. We had the reunification, which had tremendous effect on the lignite mining in the eastern part of Germany, with a lot of miners working their jobs basically overnight. And now we have the Coal Commission that proposed a steady phase out of coal-fired power plants and mining until 2038, the latest. There are a few lessons learned, which obviously there's no guarantee that they work, but the learning in Germany is basically that, chances of a successful just transition are higher if you follow those. The first one is regarding money and investment, and what we've clearly seen here is what doesn't work is basically throwing money at the region. So just giving compensation doesn't really trigger any new investment in the regions. Instead, what you need is really like a clear strategic investment. You need to have some kind of a game plan for the region, some kind of vision where you want to go, very clear investment, usually diversified in infrastructure, industry, and research. So, and building this really on the knowledge that is already existing in the region. The second learning is who should design this transformation strategy. And this is actually pretty clear that it's not the federal government. So what we've seen several times is that when federal governments come in with big ideas, trying to transform one region into making it a new center for computer chips or what do I know, it's not working like that. There's lack of knowledge, there's lack of ownership then also in the region, and it just doesn't work. Instead, what we clearly see is that the strategy of how to transform the region needs to be defined by the region themselves, because they know about their resources, they know about what they want to do, and they are also the ones who actually need to implement it then. And the last point, what's the right time actually to develop this transformation strategy? Well, actually what we've seen is we have lost a lot of time in Germany discussing about, okay, when will be the right time to build on this or develop this transformation strategies? Isn't it too soon already? And what we've seen is that usually those regions fall behind, who don't really have a plan or game plan already in the pocket. We have seen this several times, and this was especially those regions are successful today who planned long time ahead, because those planning processes take a lot of time. You need to get a lot of stakeholders on board who are directly affected on that. Things go wrong along the way. There's a lot of trial and error here. So starting the process as soon as possible is also one of the key elements for success that we have seen in the German cases.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Philip. Teraz pytanie do pani Anny Sobczak, pani doktor.
My next question goes to Dr. Anna Sobczak, representing the European Commission today. Yes, Anna, we know that in order to make any just transformation happen, we do need money. So I will ask you a question which you probably hear very often. How much money is there to spend for just transition in the European Union? Thank you very much, Carolina, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I bring you greetings from DG Energy and the European Commission. Yes, it is true. We hear this question very often. How much money is there? What programs will there be? How much money will you have for specific countries or specific regions? And I would like to give you a few figures and give you some statistics. As regards the Just Transition Fund, Carolina already mentioned it before. It is 17 billion, but it is not just about the so-called Just Transition Fund, because this fund shall be spent for mitigation of the effects of transition. A part of the fund, we have to think about programs that will be oriented at energy transition. And for that, we have the Modernization Fund, for example. with 14 billion euro. We have the Innovation Fund with 10 billion euro. We have the LIFE program, smaller one with just 1 billion, but it is still relevant. In addition, we will have funds under the so-called new generation or new budget for the recovery program, for investments and for reforms. And in this context, it is important to say that it is not only about money. The important question is what will happen to the money. The other speakers mentioned it many times. What it really takes are very specific ideas and projects that will tell us what you want to do. So not only do we offer financial support, but because of course we do offer financial support, but most of all, we offer technical help or support. We will make our experts available to you so that they can help you to prepare projects in an optimal way. And it has already been mentioned that the role of local stakeholders will be very important. The role of the regions, of municipalities will be essential. We have to talk to them. You have to talk to them to find out what the real needs are. And we are trying to do exactly that, to listen very carefully to what the stakeholders want to say in order to find out how we can solve certain issues together. So we are not trying to identify issues or problems. Instead, we are trying to identify solutions in order to foster just transition, just energy transition, taking into account data that are provided by specialists, taking into account the specific context of a certain region or a certain city. And talking about that, I would like to mention certain practices we've seen under an initiative linked to the platform for just transition of regions. When I say regions, I mean my regions in that context. And later on, if you have questions about that, I will be willing to share information if you'd like. I have another question to you. You mentioned that you listen to local governments, to the civic society. Do you also talk to governments so that all these conversations and dialogues can be coordinated somehow? Carolina, thank you for this question too. For us, every voice matters. We listen both to the national region, but also regional level, local level, private and public organizations, non-government organizations, especially youth, trade unions, and the industry. And this is the reason why, since 3 years, I think, yes, for the last 3 years, actually, we'll be celebrating the third anniversary in December of creating the platform for regions in transition. We meet on a regular basis and then we brainstorm. And as of today, we have 14 member states who have joined the initiatives, 36 regions of previously mentioned member states, and each region presents their experience, shares their best practices, and they are also very open about sharing both very positive experiences, but also certain experiences that were not entirely successful, because we believe that you can also learn on one another's mistakes in order to know what not to do. Many countries have a very rich experience, especially Germany, but also member states such as Spain with the Asturias region have a lot to share. Exactly this week, we celebrated the virtual Mining Regions Week, and Asturias presented their excellent achievements because together with all stakeholders and interested bodies, they have been able to push just transition forward and include different groups, include different sectors, different industries. This is especially important in order for this process to be inclusive, to ensure integration and inclusion of all interested parties. Thank you very much.
Also from the European Commission, but from the Director General for Research and Innovation. Let's now look at the just transition as the part of a broader picture of the European Green Deal and how it will help to achieve overall goals of the EU climate neutrality. So how it will do that? Could you tell us?
Karolina, bardzo dobrze dziękuję za konferencję. I'm sorry that I can't continue
Karolina.
move it po polski, but I will do my best if you invite me for the next conference. I'm currently, as you see in the background, connected from a region which is also in need of transition. I have already Wi-Fi, but as you see, the clock is not functioning in the background and is made out of steel. So it's quite symbolic for today's conference, and I'm glad to see colleagues here and also Anna from the same institution connected. And thanks for the invitation. We are actually now very close to the first anniversary, Karolina, of the European Green Deal. As it was announced by at the time incoming Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and just before that, heads of states had convened as you will remember, at European summit, which declared that we are faced with an existential threat with what's going on in the climate field. And under this impression, the European Green Deal had been adopted, basically targeting 8 priorities, which are important also for today's discussion: how to achieve overall the decarbonization goal of becoming Europe a climate neutral continent by 2050. So by looking at areas like transport, which is a lot, as you know, contributing to the emissions, looking at energy demand, looking at energy production. Of course, the whole agricultural sector is also very important to look at sustainable food and industrial processes. Of course, in order to reach this very ambitious goal of climate neutrality, the financing aspects are very important. Anna was already mentioning a number of figures, but as she and also other speakers said, like PHILIPP, for example, it's not all about money and about financing, but it's about making sure that we leave no one behind. And I just wanted to underline that this aspect of just transition and leaving no one behind has a very firm pillar in the Green Deal strategy of the European Commission, because it's obviously that managing this very challenging transition will lead to very significant changes, be it business models, skills requirements, but also if you look at prices, for example, and citizens. Obviously, if you look at the regions, Mr. SOBCZAK was already describing the situation, and also Isabella in some of your regions in Poland. Of course, citizens will be affected in very different ways. Not all member states, regions start the transition from the very same point. PHILIPP was already giving some examples also from the country I know best in Germany. What is important to stress is often people, particularly in these regions, say this is a very cost-intensive process. And yes, also at European level, we will support with our funds, with our knowledge. But we have also to look at the cost, obviously, of non-action. How much does it cost if we don't act to tackle the climate crisis? And there are various models which clearly show that are expensive. I think it's also important to highlight that the European Union has managed to show that we are able to decouple economic growth from emissions. So we have managed that the GDP growth can further grow, whereas cutting the emissions. And here, obviously, the role, and I'm sure, Carolina, we will come back to it later, the role of research and innovation. Science can play a hugely immense role to contribute to this very important transition. On the one side, on the technological side, if you look, for example, at renewables, at offshore, just yesterday, the Commission came up with a new strategy, which was led by Anna's DG on renewables offshore. And if you look at the costs which have gone down, I think their research and innovation has helped a lot to make this source of energy much more affordable. But of course, it's also not only about technology, but it's about how can we engage better citizens, regions, how can we find new governance models to make this transition just. Carolina, back to you. This is, I hope, has explained in a nutshell a bit the more overall context from the Commission's point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernd. So it's an existential threat, not only to our climate and environment, not doing the transformation, but also people's livelihoods are at risk. And another take would be, major take in my view, is that the cost of non-action is much higher than the cost of implementing the really just transition. Thank you very much. So to Izabela. Iza. No to teraz uzyskaliśmy w tej pierwszej...
Now in the first round of exchange, we have learned several examples of several cases and the background. Now we will move back to the Polish situation. We know the situation in Germany and how the transition looks. The situation is not easy, it is complex, but we know that we have to make just transition happen. And the only issue is that whether it will be really just or not. Now, maybe we could discuss recommendations. Could you tell us who should conduct just transition in your opinion? What would you expect from the government and from other stakeholders, including European Union? Thank you very much for this question. Before I answer this question, I would like to give one comment to the previous question. I don't want all of us to think that Silesia has no plans. In Silesia, our transition plan is quite advanced. However, we do not have any ready to implement document, just like Wielkopolska, the Greater Poland has. We also have the Wałbrzych region. I haven't mentioned it because in Wałbrzych we have no coal mines to close, but this is a region which wants to benefit from the fund in order to I might say, improve the situation, which is the consequence from the previous transition. When we talk recommendations, when we discuss recommendations, I would like to share the situation in Poland. I would like to share those elements which can be improved in our countries. Here, first of all, I think that we miss the role of the government as a constructive partner for coal mining regions. We would like to have a government whose role is to offer general strategy for regions to sign up. We know that regions have certain investments, they spend money on investments, and they should know whether in 10 years' time they will fit in the national plan. Those regions right now are part of the national energy system, and most probably in the future there will also be important elements of the system. They should be able to know how the national system will look like in 10 years' time. Another important element is regulations. need to have a clear situation to have just transition. We need to create workplaces, reconstruct local governments, creating income for local governments. These are elements and areas which are a little bit blocked today by regulations. I mean, development of wind energy in land. Wind energy for a given municipality is a very good situation because it gives income. And I also would like to talk about energy cohesion because it has benefits for people who live in a given region. It alleviates the energy poverty in a given region, and it also depends on the general economy. Right now, developing of those areas is not possible due to the regulation in Poland. We want to develop energy warehouses, but it is also impossible in the view of present-day regulations in Poland. These are the areas where we would love to have more constructive commitment of our government. Another subject, another issue concern, on one hand, the diagnosis of a situation in order to be able to plan a given transition in a given region. To have a good plan for the transition, we need to know the region very good. We need to know the education of the people. We need to know what companies operate there. Such data is not always available. This is our expectation from technical assistance from the European Union. We want to have such databases to plan just transition properly. There we also have an area where we could increase awareness of Green Deal among people. Well, this knowledge should be more directed towards the grassroots. It is difficult to talk about local meetings or local workshops due to the epidemics, which is now, but this is the area that we should focus on more. Thank you very much. I can see that there is a first question addressed to you in our chat here. We will ask it later. I would also like to ask other guests which are listening to us and watching us. I would like to invite you to ask questions in Zoom and in Facebook. Thank you, Isa. Now my question goes to President Maciej Sytek. The Eastern Greater Poland, as Isa and I have mentioned, announced its just transition and climate neutrality plan up to 2030. It is an ambition plan and a very brave plan, and moreover, it fits in the European Commission's Green Deal plan. We may call it a success story that is being written right now. How did it happen? How has it happened that you became the leader, and what are your biggest challenges?
Panie Macieju?
Mr. Maciej? I'm sorry, I forgot to turn on the microphone. I don't feel very young when you call me Mr. President. I would like you to address me as Maciej. Thank you very much. And the question that has been asked is that, well, I don't want to announce any success now, and I don't want the Greater Poland to be presented as a region who has achieved everything, because it's not true. We have a lot of work in front of us. Right now, there are several important things, and we have a certain way of thinking, which is connected to the fact that we have thought over the problem in front of us. First of all, we cannot see transition or just transition in a way that in one time perspective we will replace workplaces lost in coal mining sector to workplaces and the problem will be solved. It doesn't work like this. PHILIPP said that in Germany there was lots of funds for transitions. Even though they had the funds and knowledge, they were not able to avoid certain problems. For example, people migrated from one region to another. Well, it's not that people need work only, because they can travel 20 kilometers away and find this work there. But what they need is identity. And this identity has been described by the coal. Coal gave workplace, coal gave pride, coal gave safe satisfaction, coal described the given region. Coal was important for present day and for the future of the region and of the country. It was something important. And all of a sudden, somebody comes and says, listen, we don't want coal anymore, and you're not important anymore. So our way of thinking went towards the direction of searching for solutions, making the people who live there be able to identify with the new way of thinking. Our project is called the Greater Poland Energy Valley. It is based on the fact that some people living there, they have greater awareness of energy, so they will be able to move towards energy produced wind or solar energy or hydrogen energy. It is one of the smart specializations of the Greater Poland, Eastern Greater Poland. We started to have more broader thinking on this subject, and we started to ask questions whether we should plan it in the closest financial perspective, or maybe we should have like 20 and 30 years time perspective of creating the identity, how the Greater Poland will look in 30 years time. Many of us are young here, but years 90s in Poland, when we have the so-called maluch, the very small car, and we have shampoo called green apple, it is the beginning of the reality. We had no idea what 2020 will look like. We did not know about internet. We had no idea about smart technologies, about tools which are available right now. In the 90s, we were not even able to imagine 2020 reality. So in 30 years' time, we will have a completely different world, I guess. In the next 20 or 30 years, we may have millions of workplaces in areas which we cannot define today. This is a certain element which is unknown, and we want to have an ambitious goal. The goal is that one generation will be able to get their identity from the change and to create further days. We have lessons from other regions, and we want to be a laboratory for the Greater Poland. We have just transition fund, which generates additional money, but in our program, we assumed that we will benefit from, Ms. Sobczak mentioned, that we are going to have life. We will have Modernization Fund, the Greater Poland Operational Program, and lots of funds. And we have to remember that quite often we say that money is important, but we are not counting money which we save at the moment when we stop producing coal. We have research saying that 1 megawatt of energy has certain cost of production, and we also have a social cost at the level of 103 euros. It is an environmental cost, health cost of people living there. This is the money that is saved. So our program should not assume only the expenditure of the funds we are going to receive, but we should think in a more long-term perspective. Let's have a strategy for 20 years. We are going to have at least 2 more perspectives for this transition. Even if we achieve only 80% of our goal, we will be the winners, because we are going to have a certain buffer zone of several years to achieve what the European Commission has assumed for us. This is the way we think. This thinking is based on several pillars, which I just simply don't have time to present you in detail here. Thank you very much. So it is similar to what Mr. BIERVERT mentioned. Doing nothing is expensive. You also mentioned the long-term perspective importance, and not only the perspective governed by election cycles. Governments are sometimes slaves of such cycles. Now we will move to another question to BERND BIERVERT.
Innovation can help in just transition agenda and implementing the just transition mechanisms, and how the national and European budgets for research and innovation fit this ambition, as opposed to my favorite example of the Chinese goals, which are that Beijing would be a leader in 10 major technologies until 2025, in all new technologies until 2035, and a leader generally, globally, in all until 2045. What is the European and national response to these ambitions of China, where we are here?
Thank you, Carolina, for your question. First of all, I don't think so that we need to hide ourselves and be ashamed. We are doing a lot. I think we are also in terms of technologies a leader in many areas. But of course, we should be more ambitious in view of the existential threat. And I think at European level, the Green Deal is a good example how to contribute to this common effort. Your question on the role of research and innovation, it is clearly plays a huge role. I would maybe describe research and innovation here as a compass, which can help to lead, to show us the direction of the transition. So more a compass than as it's often perceived as simply an ATM cash machine where you can ask for money to fund your projects, which is not unimportant. I'm not neglecting this, but I think we should see research and innovation really as a compass to show us the direction with the research we are doing, where we how we can achieve climate neutrality. At European level, if I may briefly say on the framework programs, Horizon 2020 right now, the next generation of this program will hopefully soon enter into force, called Horizon Europe, where we are on the one hand aiming at supporting fundamental research. We are in another pillar looking how to boost the innovation process, in particular with the EIC initiative. And then the second pillar on which I would here like to concentrate, which is about targeting so-called societal challenges. And we have identified in the next generation of this program, in particular, two immensely important clusters, which are affiliated with numbers, cluster 5 and 6. Cluster 5, which is looking at the challenges linked to energy, transport transition, but certainly also on the role of climate science. And the other cluster, which is more looking at the issues linked to biodiversity, ecosystems, sustainable food, the role of oceans, water, etc., which play an enormously important role to achieve climate neutrality. Just to give a figure, the new program will have more or less 80 billion euro available for the next 7 years. And these two important clusters will bring in roughly 25 billion to finance research in the Green Deal related areas. You know also that we have the overall objective to spend 30% of the overall EU money or budget on climate related objectives. In the research areas, we are even more ambitious. We have set as a target 35% in terms of climate mainstreaming. The areas of just transition are so immensely important that we want to tackle them by mainstreaming it in the different areas. So like in energy, transport, we are looking a lot also on how to do research on citizens empowerment, citizens engagement. Here under the leadership in particular of European Vice President Timmermans, you know that we are working on a climate pact, which is soon to be adopted in the coming weeks, and we are looking at to support projects, and we are doing it also under the current financial instruments at governance models, at social sciences and humanities, to make sure that the just transition aspect is well met. One last point, I was hearing it also from the previous interventions. One important step is indeed to strengthen our knowledge base, our database, which we can share with all regions interested and involved. You know that at European level we have also the principle of open science and open data to share all our research for the benefit of the common objective to reach the goals. Back to you, Carolina.
Thank you very much, Bernd. So the last question now in this round, do pani Dr. Anny Sobczak.
This question goes to Dr. Anna Sobczak. Mining regions are suffering because of the so-called brain drain. In Polish, it sounds really horrible. In other words, young people leave certain regions. What can we do in order to encourage them either to stay or to come back? Or can you give us some examples of best practices? We can't hear you.
To jest pytanie do Izy.
She's still online.
Who should answer? Was it a question to Isabella? No, it was a question to Anna Sobczak.
She seems to be dropped out.
Tak?
Oh, that's not right. Okay, then I will use this time to ask some questions that we have received from the audience, and as soon as Anna comes back, I will repeat my question. So first, there was a question to Isabella. Agata Stachik is the author. The question is whether the National Plan for Energy and Climate for 2021-2030 and the energy policy of Poland until 2030 can be treated in a good frame of reference for Polish regions. Well, I would say no, because the national plan only covers a period of 2 years. And as Maciej rightly said, what is necessary is long-term planning, especially that the national plan has not been officially adopted yet, and we don't know whether it will happen and when. And actually, I'm sorry, it's not a national plan, but the energy policy of Poland has not been adopted officially, and the perspective is longer until 2040, but we would need a longer one until 2050 at least, especially that these documents do not go in line with the European strategies. So if finally Poland is able to adopt certain plans, we will have to review both these documents and update them radically. As regards the national plan, we have to realize that probably the reduction goals will be increased as soon as in December. So after that, this national plan will have to be revised very deeply. Also, there is criticism from Piotr Chmiel saying that until this day we haven't even heard one word about taxonomy. So I would like to combine it with the question Piotr asked, who should decide about how the money will be spent? There are two approaches. One is central, in order to increase the effect of scale. And the second approach is either local, based on that regions know more about their programs and their problems. So maybe Mr. PHILIPP LITZ, if you could respond to that.
Yes, sure. Well, from the German experience, I can tell what's basically done is, or followed, is a mixed approach, which basically means that both the regional level, but also the state and the federal level are deciding jointly. The pot that should be spent over the next couple of years is basically divided in two parts. There's one general part which focuses on infrastructure, for instance, and overall research budget in terms of what are federal programs to be spent in the regions directly, but also digital infrastructure and stuff like this. This is to be spent by the federal level with support from the regional level. But then on the other hand, there's also a part which is then directly spent by the regions and also the municipalities. So it's kind of a mixed approach. My understanding is that it works pretty well. Both sides are complaining that their pot B should be the bigger one, obviously, but that's relatively clear discussion as I'm seeing that.
Panie Macieju, to może jeszcze do Pana to samo pytanie, czy Pan zgadza się z Panem Filipem?
Maciej, if you could respond to that and also to what Philip said, do you agree with? If Philip, what would you think? Should a combination of both perspectives be applied, so both central, based on the effect of scale, and local, based on solid local knowledge? Well, I think maybe let me rephrase. I don't see a problem or a dilemma here. I think that it is false to just treat these two as opposed to each other. And in that respect, I agree with Philip. The Just Transition Fund is an instrument for regions, especially for mining regions. And I share the belief, and I expressed it on the platform as well, that as long as the social resistance will continue, and it is still very high, especially in mining regions, until it does not change, and it can change through because of these funds. Until this resistance is overcome, it will be really difficult to achieve any sort of transition, whether in Poland or in Europe, because people have their jobs, they are attached to their jobs, they are used to their jobs, and they don't feel they get any support in transitioning to other professions. That would be my first point. Second point is, it is not that we believe that only regions should receive assistance and that only regions should make decisions about how the money should be spent. No, but the visions of regions should go in line or hand in hand with national programs. We've been working for the last 3 years now, and yet we know that the work on the national transition program or plan is very fresh. So it is very difficult to coordinate between the two visions. We know that the government has a problem with what we do, because for Eastern Wielkopolska, Eastern Greater Poland, we try to obtain support for people who leave mining and trying to find other occupations. But we must realize that the transition is not only about miners, it is about farmers and other professions as well. They are affected. If we strive and want to achieve any sort of justice here, then our programs have to cover many groups of different beneficiaries, not a single group only. And here, the regions would be the best bodies to be able to decide, because the regions know what problems they have. But if someone wants to use the Just Transition Fund in order to build energy grids, then I don't see any sense here. I don't think any connection to the actual philosophy and goal of the Just Transition Fund. So in that sense, I would like to refer to what Dr. SOBCZAK said. There is the Recovery Fund. There is the Fund for Modernization. So the government can go to these funds and to try to obtain financing for their projects, not from the Just Transition Fund. Thank you very much. And Anna has come back to us. Anna, I'm very happy to see you. I'm very happy to see your smile. Let me ask my question again.
Coal mining regions are going through a serious problem concerning the so-called brain drain. What can we do to make them stay and refrain from emigrating or make them come back to their original regions, to their mother regions? Thank you very much. I am very happy that I am back with you again. We can see that energy, the green energy transformation is very important, and investment into digital transformation is also important because all of a sudden in Brussels, the internet connection went out, and therefore our instruments for increasing resilience has not only 37% of means for climate investments, but there's also 20% of funds for digital transformation, for digital transition, because it is necessary, as we have noticed today. Coming back to the question concerning brain drain, as I have already mentioned, investment in younger generation is very important. We have to do our best, whatever it is possible, in the scope of investments and reforms. When I talk about reforms, I mean not only reforms in the energy sector, but also in the sector of education. There are also reforms in economy required to create attractive conditions for work and for living for future generations, for our children and grandchildren. As you can see behind me, I have children and I am thinking about them and about their future. And in the European Commission, we want to think in a strategical way to take into consideration the future generations. We want to create conditions, good conditions for future generations. What kind of toolkits have we got? First of all, we have Just Transition Fund, but it's not the only tool which is going to be used for reskilling of workers. Through to the Just Transition mechanism, we want to create additional elements. We have several pillars here. The first pillar is grants, and the second pillar is loan facilities for private sector, and the third pillar is the loan facilities for public sector. We want to create a certain space for investments. In this context, it is very important to benefit from given capacities, competences, and talents which are there in the region, in those cities. But once again, I would like to emphasize, and I am very happy that Isabella and Maciej mentioned those elements. We have to listen to the people living in those regions and in those cities. We have to learn from them what their talents and their skills are to benefit from them, because there are resources, and together we can create programs and projects and plans that are going to be attractive and that are going to commit people who live there, and that are going to commit young people who will come back to those regions, and they will stay in those regions for living, for setting up families, and for having a good life. Therefore, I would like to invite you to look into a pact for skills, which which has been announced in November. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
A question to BERND, BIERVERT. As the head of a unit of social transitions, I would like to ask you to look at the transition from exactly this more social angle of not only energy, but also social human transition. So quoting the title, the English title of our today's conference, How to Make the Just Transition Just. We don't hear you.
Yes, I think that's the word of the year. No, I'm muted, or we can't hear you. I think it's the most spoken phrase of this year. I was trying my Polish by saying dziękuję for your question, Karolina, because indeed, and I agree with the other speakers, that the overall objective of further decarbonizing our planet, we cannot achieve without the people on the ground. And if we lose them in our cities, in our regions, which are mostly affected, we will not get there. So it's about indeed making sure that this is a just, a fair transition, that it's inclusive, that we listen to the people, that we recognize that there's no one-size-fits-all solution, which is imposed, be it from Brussels, from Warsaw, from Berlin, or from wherever, but that there are different conditions in different regions, that we have to find tailor-made solutions. And the platform which Anna in DG Enner and the Commission is leading is, I think, a good example how to reply to these challenges. And I'm proud that my former boss, for whom I was working, Vice President Šefčovič, that he was setting up this platform still a couple of years. Yes, I needed now to mention his name. He was working very closely with Jerzy Buzek on this. I remember well the first steps. And I think it's a good example which Anna is now continuing. You know that Anna's colleague and predecessor, Alex Tomczak, is now having a very important position in the cabinet of European Vice President Timmermans. She just this week also spoke on the Just Transition Fund in another conference. So just to underline that these aspects are very well anchored also in the thinking, in the strategy of the Commission. We have to be aware that it's the most vulnerable people who are mostly exposed to the harmful effects also of climate change. If we look at some of the natural disasters, but of course they are also very much exposed when it comes to, for example, energy poverty. PHILIPP knows probably much more from the German example with the Energiewende, and if you look at the energy prices, I mean, that's something we have to look at also from the research and in the innovation side. To make sure that we are focusing our investments in the end on affordable technologies, which are affordable for all the societies, members of the society. I mentioned at the beginning of the conference the example of renewables, of offshore. I think where huge investments have driven considerably down the prices of a technology like this, and I know that Poland is also very, very active and also successful in this area. We have to look also from a research and from a scientific perspective how we can find affordable solutions, for instance, also in the area of transport, of public transport. If I look at mobility, the country I know best and PHILIPP knows best with a huge automotive production. But I know it's also very relevant in Central European countries like Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary. How to drive this transition with the electrification, but that it becomes affordable in the end. I don't think so that a Tesla X and a Tesla S can be afforded by everyone. Well, I don't think so. I know it's not affordable, and we have to make sure that the technologies we are working on are really rolled out and are provided in an affordable manner. But also that, of course, tax systems, subsidy systems are designed that everyone can benefit from it. Carolina, I would also like to say it's important that we look at the in the context of the transition discussion, and also at the roots of some. If I may say so, populistic forces, because this, of course, I mean, if you look at the debate now, I'm now going over the Atlantic in the US, if you look at the Rust Belt, I mean, there's a clear link between populism and regions which have been left behind. And I think we can learn from these examples to strengthen our knowledge base and to make sure that these regions with a proper transition are not left behind. And I believe, and also research projects under Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe are supporting this, that looking at new governance models, but also at how to better develop participatory models in the transition can contribute to this success, because indeed we cannot do everything top down. It has to be a multi-layer governance, including all players at the different levels. Back to you, Carolina. Thank you.
Thank you. I use the most used phrase of "you are muted," and you use the most used phrase, word of the last several years, which is populism. We've been waiting for this word. So you mentioned it in terms of the Rust Belt, American region, where people have been left behind, and where the transition was far from just. So taking on this topic, there is a question. I will ask it in Polish because it's asked in Polish. Czy w związku z naruszeniem przez Polskę I Węgry
Poland and Hungary infringe the rule of law? And in such a situation, is it possible to fund certain projects from the European Union funds?
To either you, BERND, or to Anna, do you know the answer? If it's possible to channel the money that would be transferred to the central level of countries like Poland and Hungary, not to that central level, but to the regions themselves, so that they can decide themselves what to do with them, so that they are not punished by what is being done on the central level by the governments. So maybe Bernd, do you know the answer to this question?
Dziękuję, Carolina. I give it a
Thank
try.
You, Carolina.
Of course, I was just checking if I'm not muted, but I'm not muted this time. I'll try to give it a try, underlining that this is not the area, not my field of expertise. First of all, to say that the question is referring to the current discussion on the rule of law mechanism, which is indeed linking the compliance with certain criteria to the funding under MFF, including the next generation EU funds. from which Poland, as you know, is supposed to benefit a lot. And you know very well that for the time being, this mechanism has not been agreed on. So for the time being, it's not. Hasn't entered into effect. So for the time being, this means there's no conditionality between the mechanism and the funding, because of the reasons we well know. The aim, and the question was aimed at this, the aim of the mechanism indeed is not to punish, if I may say so, or to sanction. It's not about punishment, not to sanction those entities who have not broken the rules. So it's indeed it's aiming to make sure that there's still sufficient fundings then for the cities and the regions. But it well may impact, of course, if you look at the Next Generation EU, that there might be less funding then also available for the regions in the end. But as I said, there's no agreement yet on this. You know that yesterday's video conference of heads of states has not ended successfully. There's still some time and still a lot of optimism that an agreement can be found on both issues, because after all, we are talking about a very ambitious, future-oriented budget, which is very much dedicated to the topics we are currently discussing, and there's not a lot of time to lose to tackle these challenges.
Thank you very much. Teraz pytanie od Andrzeja Kassenberga.
Andrzej Kassenberg sent us a question. What is going to happen if Poland fails to confirm the plan, and thanks to support the EU plan to reach climate neutrality in 2050? And what happens if Poland vetoes and temporarily or permanently blocks the recovery fund? Is there a plan B? Maciej, what would you say about this? Do you think, is there a plan B? Thank you very much. This is an excellent question. But I'm afraid that nobody has a certain answer to this question now. I suggest that we try to remain calm and not escalate. The most important thing is to create a very specific plan of action, whether or not the funds will be there, and regardless of the amount, the problems remain. So the regions have to do something. They need the plans for this reason, even if they have to finance these plans from their own budgets. Of course, then they will have to reduce their ambitions, but they will have to tackle the problems, so we have to create plans. We know for sure that in 2030, we will close the last mine. We know that people will lose jobs. We know that in 2030, coal-based energy will be over, at least in our region. And this has been agreed, this has been decided. We still have some time, so we have to start thinking about it. Also, there was the question earlier whether or not the government is helping us. I don't want this discussion today to boil down to saying that the government is bad and we are good. No, because we have great cooperation with specific people, with directors from ministries, etc. We have working groups and they do support us in many areas. I'd suggest we leave politics to politicians and we should focus on what we can solve and on our approach to try to reach our goals that we have adopted on local and regional levels. And of course, it will have to be combined with the national level at some point, especially that the regulation clearly says that the Polish government should be the one to put the national plan together, and that in the end we will need a single plan for entire country. So we should not be focusing on politics now. Instead, we should focus on the things we can do, on the things we can influence, and then do all we can in order to achieve the best possible effects, also in cooperation with the government, also with the European Commission. We have great contact with Krzysztof Wójcik, Paweł Rotman, Ola Tomczak, and many other people as well. At the same time, we keep cooperating with the government by informing the government about what we do. And I think this is our job right now. And as for all other things, we have to wait. Sooner or later, we will all be celebrating our success, I'm sure. Thank you for that. I was so focused on my questions that I said good morning instead of thank you. Yes, I have many questions, and some of these questions are reflected in the comments I can see from our audience. It would be best for local communities to be able to decide what the Just Transition Fund should be spent on. This is one of the comments. The question is, however, is that possible, and can we include it in territorial just transition plans? Isabella, what would you say? Thank you very much for this question. I completely agree that these decisions should be taken by people who have the best knowledge about the actual needs, and these are people on the local and regional levels. But I do believe that it is happening already. I know that in Greater Poland, in Wielkopolska, they have this dialogue, and I'm sure that other regions have the same things. In Silesia, there are working groups that examine the needs of local communities and the region. However, there is one thing that still fails to work perfectly, and that is linked to the problem that we still lack a complete vision. We don't know how we should do it, because this dialogue in many regions starts by collecting project applications. And some concerns were raised in that context in the chat I've seen. What we should do first, however, was to invite all stakeholders to talk about broader purposes and objectives, and only then ask for applications and select individual projects. I would not say that what has happened already is a mistake, but maybe it's not perfect. You should not start working on just transition by calling for applications. Instead, what would be necessary is a dialogue, common dialogue, or a participatory dialogue in order to work out a common vision. And then we will know what all the positions are and have a clear vision for further cooperation. Isabella, we are coming closer to the end of this webinar. We have 7 minutes left. So Isa, if you could respond very quickly to my last question, which is actually the question to the answer to the main question of this discussion: what should we do to make the transition just and to make it happen? So my question is, according to you, what the European Union, represented on this panel by 2 general directorates, could be helpful in that transition? Well, if you are expecting a short answer, then let me just reiterate, we need dialogue. An honest one, led in good faith, and we should leave enough time for all necessary stages of the dialogue to allow everyone to make their statements and to make their positions clear. I know that a lot has been happening in the European Union already. What could be even better is to ensure better knowledge transfer so that all the regions know what exactly the European Union is planning under the Green Deal, what the strategies are. The stakeholders in the regions have to understand all these things in order to be able to plan and to prepare their local and regional strategies. And I think that this trickle-down effect from Brussels and knowledge transfer could be optimized so that we all know what's going to happen in the following strategies. Thank you very much.
Now the question to PHILIPP LITZ that appeared in one of the commentaries that I was sent. And also I would like to ask you for this one sentence summary of what do you think is the most important in the context of our discussion. So the question would be the first one: the deployment of renewables means also higher cost of energy. Is it a bad side of German Energiewende? So it's the question from the commentaries. And my question is how to make the just transition really just.
Okay, quick point on the German energy transition. It is true that Germany has relatively high power prices, especially also based on the increase of renewables over the last couple of years. The bad answer is that this is something that the German power system now has to deal with because it comes out of a time where the cost for renewables was still relatively high. So it's on the German consumers to pay that. The good message for all the countries, all other countries, or also the German power sector, which now builds up more renewables, is that renewables are now relatively cost competitive. Also to coal and other sources, and they're actually very cheap. So if you start increasing the share of renewables now, especially offshore, onshore, and solar, the effect on the power prices is actually much more limited than in the bad German example, so to say. And with regards to the last sentence, what makes a just transition a just transition? I actually wanted to give a more technical answer to that, but I actually want to emphasize what Isabella and Maciek already said before, and this is the role of cultural identity. I mean, there are a lot of technical instruments that you could use and strategies to follow, but especially the element of that phasing out of coal and embarking on this transition means also losing cultural identity for the people living in this region is a very important aspect. So I can't emphasize enough to what it means to creating this new vision, what the actual identity of a specific region. Is it being still in the energy sector, or is it something else? What this actually is very important, because all the other motivation, long-term strategies then derive directly from that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now to BERND, could you also give me your final sentence, the summary of what you think is the most important in the context of our discussion on how to make the just transition just and effective?
Thank you, Caroline. I would start by saying it's important that everyone is really aware that we are facing an existential threat. So it's not a theoretical discussion among intellectuals we are leading here, but it's really affecting everyone. And that if we don't act now, the cost of inactions will be extremely high. It's also important, I think, to keep in mind that we can reconcile the environmental climate objectives with economic objectives. So economic growth is possible, whereas investing into decarbonization. And Carolina, I didn't have the chance to reply to your China question, looking at some national budgets, but there is some, and this you were alluding to, and this also links to your question. There is some room for potential in many member states to increase also their funding on research and innovation, including, by the way, Poland. If you look at the figures, what remains important is, and I fully concur with what Isabella said, we need an honest dialogue. Certainly, Anna, myself, and colleagues in the Commission are absolutely committed to it and ready. And we need to improve the knowledge transfer that everyone can participate from it. And as I said, for example, with our research programs, we are pursuing the principle of open data, open science, so that everyone can benefit. Last point, for me, again, I'd like to stress it. I very much see this discussion as a clear call that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. There are regional disparities. There are different regional solutions to it, but we can learn from each other among peers to save. In the end, I mean, it sounds a bit pathetic, but it's in the end about saving our cities, our regions, our country, and our planet. Back to you. Thank you.
Wow. Very important words and recommendations. Thank you very much. Dziękuję, Bernd. Now to Dr. Anna Sobczak.
Thank you, Bernd. And now over to Anna Sobczak. What would you tell us? What is the most important thing in this context, in the context of just transition? How can we make it truly just and at the same time effective?
According to me, the most important element is constructive commitment, constructive, strategic, creative, and innovative. Commitment at every level. We are all complementary. All the levels, all the entities have certain role to play. As other speakers said, everyone has a certain role to play. Why the commitment is so important in strategical way? When we want to think in a long-term perspective strategy, moving on to clean energy is a source of possibilities and capacities for the whole European Union. According to our estimates, over 1 million of workplaces can be created in clean energy sector in the whole European Union. Therefore, we should think in this optimistic and constructive way to do it together, jointly, in commitment at every level and having all entities committed. Thank you very much. Thank you. And last but not least, Mr. Maciej Sytek. I would like to ask you what, according to you, is the most important in the context of just transition of Poland and the Eastern Greater Poland? I believe that it is the thing that we have been discussing for a long time. It is a broader perspective. We are at the moment of a revolution. The change of sources of production of energy is a very revolutionary moment. And all those who will have a place in this train to success will win this race in the future. And the European Union is already in this train. It is this broader perspective. In general, we talk about Poland, that Poland is a very well-developing country. We have quite high GDP, we are developing. But in the perspective of few years, when we finish European Commission work, where we talk about marking on a products, showing whether it is produced for clean or black energy, then we will notice that Poland is an exporter to Western Europe. We shouldn't be talking about the coal mining regions which produce black energy. We should talk about workplaces, because there are 10,000 and hundreds of tens of thousands workplaces which may be lost within the near time perspective. The consumer in Sweden or in Germany wants to buy a given chair, and when he sees a chair from Poland produced with black energy, the consumer will not buy this chair. Therefore, we should think in a broader perspective. The coal regions should become a laboratory, a place of experiments of how to successfully move towards the green side of power to win the future. Everybody emphasized that there is one more very important element, dialogue, and once again, dialogue at every level. Thank you very much. I believe that thanks to dialogues and discussions we have had today, for example, we will have a chance for a better future, as you have mentioned. Thank you very much for this very interesting discussion. Our guests were Dr. Anna Sobczak, Ms. Izabela Zygmunt, Mr. Bernd BIERVERT, Mr. PHILIPP LITZ, and Mr. Maciej Sytek. In the beginning of the next week, we will provide on our EURACTIV.pl website the summary of this discussion, and I would like to invite you already for the 4th December for a webinar celebrating the 5th anniversary of Paris Agreement. Thank you very much once again, and I wish you a very good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you, and goodbye.
Everyone.
Dziękuję serdecznie, do widzenia, miłego weekendu życzę wszystkim.
Thank you very much, and I would like to wish you a good weekend. Thank you. And thank you very much for great hosting, and I would like to thank the interpreters for their interpretation. Thank you very much.